Every night at exactly 9:45 p.m., Sister Elena slipped through the side gate of St. Jude's convent in the Lower East Side of the city. Her steps were slow, deliberate, barely audible beneath the hum of traffic and distant sirens. No one saw her off. No one asked questions. And for nearly 4 years, no one noticed she was even gone. To the sisters who lived with her, Elena was quiet, dutiful, and intensely private. She kept her vows, showed up early for chapel, and volunteered for the most difficult tasks without complaint. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it felt like something sacred had entered the room. Her past was mostly unknown. She had transferred from another diocese after a family matter and rarely spoke of life before the convent. She didn't carry a cell phone. She didn't own much. She just served. But outside those stone walls, beneath flickering street lamps and cold wind, Elena's other life began. She walked the same 5 blocks to a stretch of sidewalk near the old train underpass, a place the city had forgotten but the homeless remembered. There, behind a row of dumpsters and cardboard shelters, she carried out a ritual as consistent as morning prayer. She brought food, blankets, bandages, books. She listened. She hugged. She knelt beside men and women no one else would touch and whispered their names like prayers. She never told the convent, never asked permission, because she wasn't looking for approval. She was looking for the face of Christ, in the shadows. And one evening someone followed her. Not a thief, not a city official, a reporter. And everything she had protected was about to come into the light. Miles Carter had been chasing stories for a decade, but lately, every assignment felt the same. Politics, crime, scandals that made headlines and then vanished by morning. He wasn't cynical. Not yet. But he was tired. His editor had sent him to cover the rise in homelessness near the train underpass. Just another cold city problem for people who didn't want to think too hard. It was supposed to be a quick piece. A few photos, a couple of interviews, maybe a quote from a city official blaming budget cuts. Miles wasn't expecting anything meaningful. Until he saw her. It was past 10 when he arrived with his notepad and camera slung over his shoulder. The street was quiet, the kind of silence that only settles when people have given up being noticed. Then, out of the dark, came a figure. A nun. Alone. He watched from across the street, hidden behind a parked van. She moved slowly, arms full of supplies, a thermal bag, what looked like a folded blanket, and something else tucked beneath her coat. She stopped beside an old mattress wedged between a dumpster and a wall, crouched, and spoke to someone curled beneath layers of cloth and plastic. Miles raised his camera, then hesitated. There was something sacred in the way she moved. No phone, no security, no fear, just presence. He followed her for nearly an hour, staying out of sight. She never looked around, never noticed him. She visited 5 people that night, checking bandages, whispering encouragement, even reciting something quietly with an old man who clasped her hand like it was the only steady thing in his world. Miles didn't take a single photo, but he wrote everything down, because somehow, in the middle of his most routine assignment, he had stumbled onto something that felt like truth. The next morning, Miles sat at his desk staring at a blank document. The words wouldn't come. He had seen countless acts of kindness in his years reporting. Handshakes for the camera, charity galas with staged tears. But this was different. What Sister Elena did wasn't designed to be seen. She wasn't trying to change policy. She wasn't building a nonprofit. She wasn't even asking for help. She simply was there, night after night, offering warmth where the world had gone cold. Miles returned to the underpass that evening, this time without his press badge or notepad. He waited in silence. At 9:45 sharp, she appeared again, exiting through the same gate, shoulders draped in a worn gray coat, face partially shadowed by the streetlight. He followed from a distance, careful not to disturb her rhythm. Again, she visited the same few souls. She called them by name. Julian, Denise, Marcus, Lily. She didn't speak like a missionary or a savior. She asked about their pain, their medication, their stories. To each person, she gave exactly what they needed: a wool blanket, a thermos of broth, a simple prayer. And then she'd move on, silent as snowfall. Miles didn't sleep that night. He searched records, looking for any mention of her work. Nothing. No blog, no charity listing, no local news piece. Not even a whisper inside church bulletins. It was invisible, and that made it powerful. The next day, he visited the convent. He asked to speak with Sister Elena. The receptionist blinked. Sister Elena? Of course. But I think she's in the kitchen. In the kitchen? She's always helping with the dishes. It struck him. After everything he saw, this woman returned to mop floors and scrub plates, as if the nights didn't transform her into something extraordinary. Miles knew then. This story had to be told, but he wasn't sure she'd let him. Miles waited in the convent's modest reception hall, its whitewashed walls lined with old crucifixes and faded portraits of saints. The scent of lemon-scented cleaner lingered in the air. Everything was quiet, humble. It felt almost too small to contain the weight of what he'd seen. When Sister Elena entered, she didn't seem surprised to see him. "You've been following me," she said calmly, drying her hands on a towel. Miles stood. "I have. I'm sorry, but I needed to know if it was real." She looked at him for a long moment. Then softly, "It's not a story." "But it is," he replied. "It's the kind people forget the world still needs." She walked past him, gesturing toward the small courtyard. "Come," she said. They sat on a stone bench surrounded by bare branches and early winter wind. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, she said, "I started going after Gloria died." "Gloria?" "She was homeless, slept near the cathedral steps. I brought her soup once, then again, then every week. I learned her story, her real name. She died the same night the shelters turned her away." Miles swallowed hard. "After that," Elena continued, "I couldn't pretend I didn't see them. So I went. Every night. Quietly. Why hide it? Because when people see you doing something good," she said slowly, "they turn it into noise. They make it about approval. Applause. But these people, Julie and Lily, they don't need a savior. They need someone who sees them, really sees them." Miles nodded. "But maybe others need to see you, so they can remember how to see them." She looked away, troubled. "What happens when it becomes about me?" Miles paused. "Then we tell the story so it doesn't." Sister Elena didn't give Miles permission, exactly, but she didn't stop him either. "All I ask," she said, standing to leave, "is that you don't make me a hero. Make them human." Miles carried her words like a fragile relic. For the next week, he returned to the underpass, this time not to follow her, but to meet the people she served. He brought coffee, sat in silence, asked permission before writing a single sentence. Julian spoke with the voice of a teacher, because he once was. Marcus had been a welder. Denise used to play piano. Each story was layered, complicated, filled with pain. But none of them were empty. None of them were beyond dignity. The story Miles wrote was unlike anything he'd published before. He titled it, "The Woman Who Walked in the Shadows," so others wouldn't be forgotten. No photos of Elena's face. No timeline. Just scenes, carefully painted, rooted in truth. He described her cracked boots, her silent prayers, the way she cupped a man's face when he cried. He ended it not with her name, but with theirs. The article went live on a Sunday morning. By noon, it had been shared over 50,000 times. By Monday, city officials had called the convent to ask how they could support the work. Local businesses dropped off blankets. Restaurants offered food. Donations flooded in, none addressed to her, but all asking, how can we help the people she helped? Inside the convent, Sister Elena read the piece alone in her room. She wept, not because it was beautiful, but because it was honest. She didn't want fame. She only wanted them to be seen. And somehow, quietly, without ever asking for it, that's exactly what had happened. The convent was not a place of scandal or spectacle. It thrived on rhythm, prayer, silence, duty. So when Sister Elena's story swept through the city, even reaching national headlines, the disruption was felt like a tremor beneath chapel floors. At first, the sisters were quiet. Some were stunned, others unsure. Mother Agnes, the eldest and most revered, asked Elena to join her in the garden that afternoon. They sat beside a stone fountain, the wind rustling the dry branches above. I would have appreciated knowing, Mother Agnes said gently. Elena bowed her head. I wasn't hiding it from you. I just wasn't doing it for anyone's attention. And you didn't think we could have helped? Elena looked up. I didn't want it to become a ministry. I wanted it to remain a choice. The older woman studied her, then smiled faintly. You remind me of someone. Who? Christ. Sneaking away in the dark to serve the ones no one wanted to see. Elena's eyes welled with quiet emotion. It wasn't approval she had been seeking, but being understood mattered more than she realized. By evening, several of the younger sisters had joined her, quietly. No announcement, no schedule. They began collecting supplies in the basement, folding blankets, preparing simple meals. Elena watched them with a mixture of awe and worry. She hadn't wanted this, and yet she saw it now. What starts in the shadows doesn't always belong there forever. Miles sent her a short message the next day. I kept the promise, and they're listening. Elena replied simply, so now we speak. Together. And with that, something shifted. Not in volume, but in depth. Her quiet acts had become something larger. Not louder, just unavoidable. A week after the article was published, a folded letter arrived at the convent, addressed only to the woman in the night. It was handwritten in shaky cursive by someone named Harold, who had once lived under the 7th Street Bridge. Sister Elena recognized his name instantly. He was the man who always refused help, but once took a pair of gloves from her without meeting her eyes. I don't know if you remember me, the letter began, but I remember the soup, the gloves, the way you said goodnight like it mattered if I slept well. No one had talked to me like a person in years. Elena sat with the letter, holding it to her chest. It was the first of many. Over the next few days, dozens of envelopes arrived, some from those still living on the streets, others from people who had once been homeless and rebuilt their lives. Most didn't mention her by name. They spoke of her kindness, her quiet smile, her presence. The city, too, responded. A once-abandoned building near the underpass was offered to the convent as a donation. A local carpenter offered to renovate it. A nurse volunteered to provide medical support. Elena had never imagined her nightly visits would birth an entire shelter. But now it wasn't hers alone. It belonged to all of them. And the people? They called it the Lantern House. A name that wasn't official, but stuck. Because Elena had been their lantern in the dark. Miles visited once more, sitting quietly beside her as volunteers painted the walls. You changed everything, he said. No, Elena answered. They were waiting. I just lit the match, and outside, as the sun set, a line began to form, not just of the homeless, but of those who had come to see them. The opening of the Lantern House wasn't marked by a ceremony or a ribbon cutting. Sister Elena insisted it remain simple. No cameras, no speeches, just hot soup, warm beds, and open arms. It was exactly how she had always served, quiet, intentional, human. But even without an official event, word spread. On the first night, more than 20 people arrived. Some knew Elena. Others had heard of the place from friends. A few came not for help, but to help. Former recipients, now volunteers, paying forward what they had once received. The line between giver and receiver blurred, and that was exactly how Elena wanted it. Inside, the atmosphere was nothing like a shelter. There were no cold white walls or sterile lighting. Volunteers hung soft curtains. Handmade quilts lay folded on beds. Music played quietly from a corner speaker. There were books, coffee, and silence when needed. One evening, a boy named Luis came in with his mother. They'd been evicted the week before. He clutched a worn-out toy car and wouldn't let go of Elena's hand. She knelt beside him and whispered, "You're safe here." He believed her. Later that night, as she swept the front steps, Sister Elena saw something that made her stop. Across the street, several locals, shop owners, retirees, young couples, had begun lighting candles in their windows. No one coordinated it. It wasn't planned. But one by one, the neighborhood responded to the light. A reporter later asked Elena how she felt seeing her once secret work spark such visible change. She smiled, brushing hair from her face. "It was never about being seen," she said. "It was about seeing them, until everyone else did too." The lantern house glowed from within, but its light now touched the whole street. And it was just the beginning. Miles hadn't expected any of this. When he first followed Sister Elena, it was supposed to be a quiet exposé, a gentle piece to fill a slow news cycle. But it had become something else entirely. He returned to the lantern house often, not with a notepad, but with sleeves rolled up and meals in hand. He'd stopped being a reporter and started being a participant. One chilly Thursday evening, he sat alone on a bench outside, watching volunteers carry in folded blankets. Across from him, Elena knelt beside an elderly man who'd collapsed in exhaustion, gently wiping his forehead and speaking words no one else could hear. Miles didn't write that moment down. He just watched. Later that night, he opened his laptop and began typing, not for his editor, but for himself. He wrote about the silence that heals, about faith that doesn't shout, about how one woman's hidden acts became an unspoken invitation for an entire city to care. He called it the miracle we almost missed. The piece went viral. But this time, the attention didn't make Elena retreat. Instead, she used it. She and the sisters created a small website, not to fundraise, but to teach. They posted resources on how to help locally, lists of shelters, hotlines, ways to make sandwiches with dignity. Because, as Elena said, helping isn't hard. Noticing is. Miles kept coming back, drawn not by a story, but by a need to be near something real. In a world spinning fast with headlines, he had found a quiet center, a place where compassion wasn't content. It was a practice. And each night, as the lantern house lit its rooms, the city remembered what it meant to be human, not in theory, but in action. Sister Elena never saw herself as a leader. She preferred silence over speeches, presence over platforms. But as the lantern house grew, and as more people arrived, not just for shelter but for meaning, she realized her quiet path had become a road others wanted to walk too. One evening, during a gathering with the newer volunteers, someone asked her, "Why this? Why the streets, when you had a convent and comfort?" She paused for a long moment, holding a chipped mug of tea. "I once read," she began slowly, "that if your compassion does not reach the edges of society, then it is incomplete. The people at the margins, they are the test of our love." The room fell silent. Some nodded, some cried. And with that, Elena decided to take what she called her final vow. Not one written in any religious order's book, but one she carried in her soul. To never again turn away from someone just because their suffering made others uncomfortable. From that day, she stepped into a new role, not abandoning the streets, but empowering others to take her place beside her. She trained new teams. She worked with local churches, schools, and even skeptical city officials. Slowly, what began as one nun with a thermos and a quiet voice became a web of kindness across neighborhoods. But Elena herself never changed. She still walked the streets at night when no one was watching. She still remembered names others forgot. She still held hands, prayed softly, and carried bandages in her pockets. Her vow wasn't grand. It was persistent. And as she walked home one night under a soft drizzle, passing lit windows with candles flickering, she whispered to the dark, "I see you. You still matter." And the darkness listened. Years passed, and the city changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Lantern House became more than a shelter. It became a symbol, a place spoken of in school projects, Sunday sermons, even late-night radio stories. But Sister Elena never claimed credit. In fact, she often slipped out of group photos or stood quietly at the edge of gatherings. It was only after her passing, years later, that the full weight of her impact truly settled in. She died peacefully in her small room behind the kitchen, surrounded by the scent of fresh bread and blooming lavender. Her hands were folded over a worn cloth cross. By morning, the line outside the Lantern House wasn't of people needing help. It was of those she had helped. Dozens, then hundreds. Many brought something, a flower, a note, a drawing from a child she had once comforted. The reporter, now long since retired from the paper, wrote her obituary. He didn't include her religious title or her awards, just a simple headline. She walked where it hurt, so others wouldn't be alone. A year later, a bronze plaque was placed beside the door of the Lantern House. It read, "In memory of Sister Elena, who loved the forgotten and reminded us to look again." And to this day, candles still appear in windows each winter. No one organizes it. No one promotes it. But people remember. Because one life, lived fully in compassion, doesn't end. It echoes. It teaches. And it invites us all to answer. Who are we seeing? Who are we passing by? Because maybe the quietest among us are showing the way. Thank you for listening to this story. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and what act of kindness moved you most today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true and inspiring stories.